guests as they come out.
Thank you, Warren. It's a pleasure to be here. What I'd like to do is spend a couple minutes reviewing the findings from EBRI's 2018 Employer Financial Wellbeing Survey. We're probably going to be going through the slides relatively quickly, but the issue brief containing all this information is available up on our website if you'd like to check it out. And before I get started, I want to explicitly thank the funders of the EBRI Financial Wellbeing Research Center, as well as Greenwald & Associates, who assisted us with the survey. A couple things I want to accomplish today. First of all, I want to give you a very quick review of the background and the key findings, but then I want to focus on 4 specific topics. First of all, what steps were taken to understand employees' financial well-being needs, at least among our survey respondents? What factors were important to them in measurement of financial well-being initiatives? What considerations did they make to determine whether or not to offer financial well-being, or whether they plan to do financial well-being in the future? And then finally, what were the challenges to the company in offering financial well-being initiatives? When we get done with that, I want to spend just a couple minutes talking about what we're going to be doing for phase 2 of our Financial Wellbeing Research Center in 2019 as we start building out a database of individual firms and financial service providers. So as far as the background, again, this was a 15-minute online survey. We did 250 full-time benefit decision makers. We did this summer. They had to work at a company with at least 500 employees, so we haven't really looked at the small market yet. And they had at least be interested in offering financial wellness programs. They didn't actually have to have one right now, but at least be interested in doing so. Respondents were required to have at least a moderate influence on their company's benefits program and financial wellness offerings, and they were required to hold an executive officer or manager position in HR, compensation, or finance. And as I mentioned earlier, Greenwald & Associates assisted us and administered the survey. Well, the very first thing to keep in mind, and we basically for today's presentation only bifurcated by size. We also have information breaking it out by industry, if you'd like to see that in the issue brief. But basically, among those in our sample, about 3 in 4 of the firms with 10,000 or more employees currently offer financial wellness initiatives, compared to, if you're looking at that light blue part of the bar, only about half of those with less than 10,000 employees in that sample were actually already offering it. We also found that about a quarter of all firms are highly concerned with their employees' financial well-being. We specifically asked them on a 1 to 10 scale, how concerned were you? And we grouped it in such a way that those with 1 to 6 was low concern, 7 to 8 were moderate concern, and 9 to 10 were high concern. That basically was an even split among the 3 different categories. Firms with high concern, as you might expect, are much more likely to currently offer the financial wellness initiatives. We also found that 4 in 10 of those in the survey considered themselves to be in the pilot stage of offering financial wellness initiatives, and probably a little bit discouraging is we found that only 2 in 10 currently offering financial wellness initiatives consider them to be some kind of a holistic program. So more or less these are still considered in many cases to be almost a one-off situation. We also found that most employers do or would pay for their financial wellness initiatives. And we also found that 45% of employers would solely fund the initiatives, and only 9% of the respondents said the entire cost would be shifted to the employees. We also found that very few firms are using specific financial wellness metrics or assessments to understand their employees' needs. So what we're going to do now is go through a couple of different slides looking at basically how the respondents said they're trying to understand their employees' financial wellness needs. And these first slides are looking at the fact that you have a relatively small percentage that either conducted a financial wellness needs assessment, that's the top two bars split out by plan size, and if you look at the same situation for those who created a financial well-being score or metric, again, it's the vast minority of those respondents that would use either of those two devices to try to figure out the financial wellness needs of their employees. Well, what about something else? We also looked in the next slide at those who were conducting surveys, and we found that about half of the firms use surveys to try and figure out their employees' financial well-being needs. And as far as focus groups, we found that about a third of the respondents would use focus groups to try to assess their employees' financial wellness needs. And then finally, what about those that did somewhat more of an analytical approach? We found about 2/3 of the firms are examining the data that they already have on hand to do this assessment, while about a third of them are analyzing quantitative data to try to assess the financial needs of their employees. Well, let's move from that to very quickly looking at how the employers, the respondents, said they're going to measure the impact of the financial well-being initiatives. And we asked them basically what are the top 3 factors that either are or will be important in the measurement of your financial wellness initiatives. And probably not too surprising, worker satisfaction and employee stress came out as the top 2 considerations in what they will use to assess whether or not these financial well-being programs are actually doing the jobs that they put them in place for. We also asked them basically what were or will be your top 3 considerations used to determine whether to offer financial wellness benefits to your employees. And we find that there's a number here. First of all, cost was, of course, the most important. Then interest among employees. And then the next 2 use this magic phrase value proposition, which I promise I'll get to in the next slide. We found that about 40% said value proposition to the employees, whereas 27% said it was going to be value proposition to the company. So we changed that into an open-ended question to try and figure out what they were referring to. And you can see there is not a lot of consensus, especially when you break it out by plan size, on what they mean by a value proposition. If you look at that second one on the left-hand side, though, one of the issues that comes up quite frequently when we have this discussion is it going to be an ROI consideration? Is it going to be something that focuses on return on investment? And surprisingly, for the smallest and the largest, you have a fair percentage of individuals that consider that to be the value proposition. But in the middle part, you find that those with 2,500 to 5,000 employees, that it's not as relevant to them. There's a lot of industry correlation going on here with respect to certain entities as far as those responses are concerned, but overall there does not seem to be an overwhelming desire that ROI be a consideration in whether or not these financial well-being programs will be used. The last slide I want to do to just basically go over some of the results is what are the challenges to the company. And let me just very specifically go through each of these. First of all, when we ask them what are the top 3 challenges your company faces or anticipates facing in offering financial well-being benefits in the workplace, complexity of the program, probably not surprisingly, comes in first. Then lack of staff resources to coordinate or market the benefits, lack of interest among the employees, and challenges in making the business case to management and to justify the cost. Now, the one that I've got highlighted in red, lack of ability or data to quantify the value added of the initiative, is basically what I'm going to get to in the next slide as we talk about phase 2. But I think a case could be made that in many cases, those 4 top choices as far as their challenges to the company all could be at least partially alleviated with better data, better analytics for the employer in making those decisions. So what I'd like to spend my remaining 2 minutes on before Warren gives me the hook here is what we're going to do for phase 2 of the EBRI Financial Wellbeing Research Center research agenda for 2019. We have been reaching out to a number of financial service providers as well as a number of employers to try to get information that we could actually use to make quantitative analytical assessments of the effectiveness of this. Basically, what we're doing is we're working primarily with employers to get information on what types of financial well-being initiatives they've had, when they were put in place, and working with the employers and or their consultants get at least flags for the employees to find out which of these employees have actually used those initiatives. Then we will basically be combining that with information that they're providing us in large part on their 401k participants, so we can find out, at least at the first phase, what the impact of many of these programs has on participation decisions, contribution decisions, asset allocation decisions, and probably most importantly, loan activity and hardship withdrawals. After we have that information, many of the employers have indicated at least a willingness to also give us HR information so we can go back and use the same kind of hashing technique. We never get personally identifiable information. We never get a social security number, we never get a name, we never get an address, but basically using a procedure similar to what we're using on our 401k database, we will then basically be able to hash that in to find out information, and many times they want us to analyze absenteeism and some kind of productivity measures. That's what we're trying to establish as an overall common denominator among all the sponsors that are in the database. And then, as you might expect, a lot of the employers have more or less one-off things that they'd like us to look at in addition to that. So this is something that hopefully by the next policy forum in May, we'll actually have the results available and can come back and try and provide some quantitative analytics as far as the overall effectiveness, not only for the program, but most importantly, broken out by demographics. So we'll look at it by age, we'll look at it by wage, we'll look at it by tenure, and hopefully be able to provide some sort of at least first blush at where we're going to be going as we build out this Financial Wellbeing Research Center database. Thank you.
Thank you, John.